Wait, there's also a part on the website where you can find the...
Okay, so unfortunately we weren't able to see the moon, but I do like your idea about if there is a moon app or an app that tells you where the exact location of it is in the sky, that could be very useful. You might do that for the sake of your homework, just so it makes it that much easier. Okay, so, alright, so we didn't see it this time. We'll see about maybe doing it next week and see if we can catch it on our next week. We'll find out. Okay. Alright, so we're going to move on with our lesson, and I'm actually, let's see here. Yep, I'm going to pull up another video real quick. We get to this. Hold up.
Oh, is it?
We'll get to it in a bit. Hold on. Okay, so are you familiar with the Jesus fish, the Christian fish? Are you familiar with the Darwin fish?
No.
Yeah.
Not so much. Some of you. Okay. How about the true fish eating the Darwin fish? I'm not really familiar with that one either, but okay. So the last image brings up a great question many Christians struggle with. Is science the enemy of faith? So I pose the question to you. Is science the enemy of faith?
I would say opposite.
Okay,
No.
You said no first. Why?
Because God talks about it in the Bible.
Okay. Can you
About science.
Okay. All right. How about you?
I would say it's actually the opposite. I mean,
Okay.
things might not at first might not line up with what is said in the Bible, but when more is discovered, it all lines up and it all seems to fit with science. So I don't think science is actually the enemy. I think it helps prove it.
Yeah, I think some of the ideas that have come from science are
Really
yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because it really also depends on the timeline we're talking about regarding science. Certainly more modern scientific aspects have gone away from religion or away from Christianity. If you look at the Renaissance, though, many of the scientists were actually Christians, or at the very least believed in the idea of a deity, and they actually were convinced by what they discovered in science that there had to be a designer of some kind. Another good, interesting fact that a lot of people don't know, if you read C.S. Lewis, I'm sure you've all heard of C.S. Lewis, really awesome guy, probably one of the most intelligent apologetists / philosophers of his time. But he actually talked in one of his discussions about the fact that most people assume that Christians and medieval people assume that the earth was flat. Well, believe it or not, the actual medieval documents and books that were used in the monasteries for learning actually straight up said that the earth was round. Even as back as the medieval period, they believed that the earth was round. Now, there was controversy over that. There was a discussion of, is the earth flat, is it round? And people like Columbus and people theorized that it was round, and basically you kind of had this, I guess, back and forth going on during these periods. But even back as early as the medieval period, they believed that the earth was round. So it's kind of interesting if you look at that. Okay, so in 2011, the Barna Group published the results of a study surveying young adults about their perceptions of Christianity and the church. 3 out of 10 adults feel that churches are out of step with the scientific world we live in. 1 out of 4 young adults believe that Christianity is anti-science. Okay, so do you agree that the church, more specifically your church, is out of tune with science today?
I'm into my church in months, but from what I remember, my pastor talked about science and figures from back then, scientific figures sometimes in his sermons.
Okay. I'll pose a question that's not on this. Do you think that maybe denominational differences would have a role to say in science? Like maybe some denominations are more science-minded, some are less. I'm not picking one, by the way. I'm just asking, do you think that could be a factor?
Probably.
Okay. Have any of you ever seen kind of like an example of either or, where you've seen like the example of basically the church being for science or supporting science, or rather being against science? Have you ever experienced that?
I've experienced for science. I mean, I go to Brownsbridge, and they've been closed for a while. But Andy Stanley, he's talked about science in his science before. He's integrated science into it, and what actually scientists that aren't Christian have found, and how that supports some things that happen in the Bible.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Very good. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? No one else speak at once. Okay. All right. So our next video then is we're going to look at the Science versus Religion video, and I'm going to try to stop the video at various points, and we'll talk about each point. And with what time we have left, let's see, 9:51, and it's, okay, yeah, 10:25, so we're doing fine. We still got 30 minutes, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the lights off again, and we'll start this video, and I will try to stop it at the correct time.
If we just take God out of it, might there not be something, right, that your scientific beliefs can't explain?
My name is Matt. I'm 41 years old. I'm a pastor.
I'm Gil Kay, 40 years old. I am a minister of the Buddhist church.
I'm Andrew. I'm 42 and I'm a chemist.
I'm Jess. I'm 36 and I'm a volcanologist.
I'm Don. I'm 64. I'm a paleontologist and geologist.
I'm Amy. I'm 53 and I'm a rabbi.
I believe this universe was created.
This is literally my greatest fear, that I'd be all alone in this circle. I believe that this world was created. I've placed my faith in a God that is infinitely creative in what He's made. He then deserves my worship and my affection. Seriously, last night I was talking to my wife, I was like, what if there's a question that I'm the only one that agrees to? She's like, just stay where you are. I was like, I don't know.
The big problem is that immediately you start talking about creator, and I've battled creationism most of my entire career as an evolutionary biologist and paleontologist. It brings in a whole category of things that violate my rules as a scientist as well. And when I step back from that, especially when I step back from where I started as a religious person when I was younger, I look at this and I say, you know, if anything, what we see now about the universe shows how poorly designed it is, and how sloppy it is, and how painful it is, and all these things which don't speak to a very benevolent creator, because if anything, it makes him look bad.
I don't believe in a supernatural God. I'm a Reconstructionist Jew. For me, I don't rely on a supernatural creator in order to remain astounded at the beauty of this world. It's sloppy. It's the world, right? It's the world. We're sloppy, the world is sloppy, but it's also incredibly magical and worthy of awe and respect. And that it's here is amazing, that we're here is amazing, and I want to live in relationship to that amazement.
Science can answer moral questions.
Okay, so we'll pause it there. Ask that question. Yeah, thanks. Either way, it works. So, can science answer moral questions? They're about to discuss it. What do you think? One way to think about this is, what is science exactly? Like, what is the science the study of?
The study of fact.
Okay, is it the study of fact? Is it the study of natural law? Science is the study of natural law, how nature works, how the physical world works. It doesn't necessarily really study anything like the supernatural. It doesn't look into metaethics or anything else. It specifically is designed to study the order of the universe and how the laws apply, right? So think about that. If that's all it is targeted to study mainly, is it qualified to dictate or to understand morality?
No.
Okay. What is morality?
Morality is, like God said, the laws written on all our hearts, something that we know.
Okay, so God's law is certainly a form of morality, right? Yeah, morality is probably a bit of a broader term. It's essentially, it's kind of how we perceive what is right and what is wrong, you know? Now that is generally agreed or disagreed upon kind of across the board. I mean, there are people who, obviously like us Christians, we have a certain morality that is based in God's law. That is our morality. But other people don't necessarily share that morality. So how does science dictate what that morality should be? Interesting question, isn't it? Okay, so let's move on and see what they say about it. And I think we're all going to go for like another minute. We'll stop again, so yeah.
I never looked to science to go like, is murder right or wrong? I look to science to say how many murders were committed last week. You know, that's what I want to know. And then say, is there a trend? What is the cause of these murders? Blah, blah, blah. And then we use, we use different tools, I guess is the best way of putting it, to assess whether or not we should be murdering people.
Where do those morals come from then?
I think they're innate in humans. All societies have had certain things they agree on, regardless of religious background and so on. We don't require a deity or any kind of religion to give us those things. We come with them as part of our species. And for me, it's not so much that science can answer moral questions, but science certainly can guide us in a lot of ways, especially when moral questions in conflict with reality as we've now learned it.
Okay, so regarding that, he basically just admitted science really isn't designed or qualified, and this is coming from a scientist. He's saying we're not really qualified to answer the moral questions, but it can help you with a lot of things, which is a very broad statement. Are there things that your beliefs cannot explain?
I mean, there's some things that the Bible doesn't specifically describe because it doesn't work about geology or paleontology.
Okay, good. Good answer. I mean, that's a fair answer. You know, while we look to the Bible as kind of the definite truth and 100% across the board, it doesn't necessarily cover every single detail about everything in life, right? I mean, there's a lot of things we kind of have to either form our own understanding about or do our best using biblical guidance and science to kind of generate a fair, educated opinion. Okay, so do you think that there are things that science cannot explain?
Yeah.
Okay. Give me an example.
Well, just mostly the supernatural levels. Christians believe in.
That's a really good word.
Yeah.
Yeah, supernatural. Here's why that's a great word. Super means over or outside of, okay, in terms of the term. So supernatural means outside of that which is natural law, something that is not measured in natural law. So if science is concerned with what is measured in natural law, should it be concerned or should it be qualified to answer the questions of anything that might be outside of natural law?
You can try to, right?
It can try to, but it's probably not going to do a great job of explaining it in this. And the reason I bring this up is C.S. Lewis made that very point, is that while science is absolutely necessary to study God's laws of nature and how God designed the world, when you try to use it to perceive something that is outside of the realm that it studies, it's no longer really a valid method for studying that. You know, you'd have to have something else to study supernatural law. And that is a really interesting point about science, is that yes, science answers a lot of questions, but it may not necessarily answer all the questions. We use a term a lot called miracle, right? Science will often use a different term. You've probably heard the term anomaly, okay? It's something that science admits we can't explain it right now. Maybe we'll explain it one day, but we can't explain it now. It's something that doesn't make sense to us. It's an anomaly. It's something that should not have happened but did. And so that's interesting that even in science, they actually do admit there are occasional times when something happens that doesn't match the natural order that they've studied. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think maybe some things happen that don't conform to any natural law at all. Like, it just can't be explained. Like, like you can't say if I have enough time, I'll prove that I gave birth to my mother. Is that possible? And likewise, in science, there may be some things that can't be explained because they just don't conform to natural laws that are exist.
And many scientists will debate you on that and say, well, one day we will be able to explain it. Well, eventually science will answer everything, you know, which is, again, it's a bit of a, in a way, you could argue.
That's a lot of faith for a scientist.
I was going to say, that's a really good point. It's like scientists carry a certain amount of faith. Remember, part of faith is believing without seeing. Well, scientists have not seen everything. They've seen a lot of evidence that supports their theories, but haven't necessarily proven everything yet. But they have faith that they will be able to. Either way you cut it, you've got faith. Whether you believe in Jesus and creation, or you believe in science, or you believe in evolution, no matter what belief system you hold, there is a certain level of faith in it. So that's an interesting point. Okay, we'll continue again, and we're going to go on into about 2 or 3 minutes.
There are things that my beliefs cannot explain.
I've got serious gaps in my faith that require a supernatural answer. I mean, I can't understand and fathom the complexities of the universe all on my own. I'm a Christian. I had at a church service, someone had a hurt shoulder, and they said, my shoulder really hurts, so you pray for my shoulder to get better. I'll be honest with you, I have about 5% faith that that's going to work out. But I prayed for him, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, you know, I want this shoulder to get healed in Jesus' name. And I walked away thinking, oh no, another disappointed person who didn't get healed today. Well, the next morning that person called me and said, you wouldn't believe it, my shoulder feels 100% better. I still don't have a good answer to that. But I just know every time I get an answer or an opportunity to exercise my faith in a supernatural way, I want to take that opportunity because I just don't know what the answer might be. It could be something terrific.
I totally agree with you. I liked you when you said 5%. I pretty much feel the same way. Yeah. But in my hometown in Japan, like, we have this kind of service to sort of console the spirits in the land. Like, when we chant for like an hour, half an hour maybe, then everybody feels, oh, it feels so peaceful. But then I can't quite explain it, like logically. And that's sufficient in that situation.
Science is all about understanding what we can understand, and in science you're pretty much not allowed to even consider the supernatural because it's beyond testable hypothesis. It's beyond anything that you can evaluate in any what we might call an objective manner. We are comfortable with the idea that we do not know something, and we say we do not know something, and that someday we might find the answer or we may not.
There's a lot out there that we can't explain, but it has absolutely nothing to do with my beliefs. I was raised Catholic, and I'm just as confused now as I was then about what's really going on. You know, there is this small amount of stuff we can explain. I don't need to have a belief about it. I don't even need to go beyond that and just to decide that it's magnificent and terrifying all at the same time and just kind of leave it at that.
So I think your answer to the question would have been yes. I mean, because I think you might agree that there's stuff that you can't even know to test yet. So how could... Maybe there's something beyond scientific theory and proof that we don't even know yet. And I'm not saying God.
Okay.
If we just take God out of it, might there not be something, right, that your scientific beliefs can't explain?
That's right, certainly. But also in my philosophy, I don't see any point in putting any kind of supernatural label on it as an explanation. It's just not solving the problem.
I believe in life after.
I actually like that discussion. It's interesting. I do love that the one lady really does not want God in the picture. Okay, so I believe in life after death. Discuss.
Obviously, all Christians do.
True.
Well, so beside the obvious in terms of what Christians believe, obviously we believe that when we die we have a soul, a soul and spirit that essentially goes on. What do you think about life after death?
I think that's, well, I mean, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, He died for our sins and rose from the dead, and that's what we believe in heaven.
Okay. How would you describe heaven or the afterlife, or what you think of as what you're going to see when you get there?
I personally think that's beyond human.
Okay.
Like
beyond human
perception.
perception. Okay.
It's almost like, I don't know, I've always been enamored by like quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and there was a quantum scientist that said if you understand it, if you think you understand it, then you have no idea what you're talking about because it's so complex. And I think that's one of the things. If we think we understand what's going on, then we are way off base.
Okay.
Like we just can't. We can't understand it. But some of the quantum, like the quantum mechanics and physics that people start talking about, you can't. It's so abstract that we can't understand that.
I mean, that's a fair point when you consider the fact that we experience all the physical things, but at the same time we're a spirit, right? I mean, that's what God made us to be. We're a spirit and a soul. So what we experience as a spirit and a soul may not necessarily be what we've experienced physically. So what we think of in terms of physical is very limited. Okay?
What I was going to say is, like, I haven't studied about it a lot, but as far as, like, life after death, I mean, like, heaven and stuff, it also talks about, like, being on the new earth, or, like, all of that stuff, and not necessarily, like, I don't know, like, obviously you go to heaven, but, like, there's all the other stuff, too, when you really look into it.
But also, the way heaven, it was described in the Bible. God literally told us what to expect.
There are certainly visual aspects described. It also implies, if I remember my revelation Revelation correctly, there'll be a new heaven and new earth.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of think of like,
maybe Earth comes down.
Krispy Kreme
No,
on
heaven's
every
down.
number.
yeah, well, I was gonna say maybe heaven comes down to earth or a new kingdom. It certainly implies that there's going to be aspects of physical and spiritual kind of at the same time going on. One question that I've been asked by a friend of mine who's a really great mentor, and I'll ask you all the same one that I never really thought of is, are we physical beings having a spiritual experience? Do you think?
Okay, after
Let me process that.
Okay, I'll ask the question again. Are we physical beings? Did God make us physical beings having a spiritual experience?
I feel like we're spiritual.
I like that. There you go. I like that. So is it that or is it the other? Or are we spiritual beings actually having a physical
I
experience?
think that.
I think that's
One of the, and I'm not going to get too much into Holy Spirit on this, but just because, that each denomination is different, but one thing that I've always thought of is people will often say, well, I don't feel the Spirit, and I don't feel Holy Spirit working in me. And it's like, well, aren't you already Spirit though? So do you have to really feel it? Does it have to be an emotional thing? I mean, it can be. I'm not saying it can't be it, or is it that you're already there? I mean, once you've accepted God, that heart is awakened to God, right? I mean, it is now open. You're already in the Spirit at all times, so the question is, are you going to listen to that or not? It's an interesting question to pose, and again, different denominations have different perspectives on it. Okay, so yeah, good one, life after death. I don't know why, but I always had this mental picture of life after death is that we'll all be at a big dinner table, like the banquet feast of the bride, and I'm going to be that troll guy way down the line of the dinner table, like hundreds of miles down the dinner table, like, all right, Jesus, what did we get right? And what did we get wrong? We're going to be here a while, so I just got to know. So, no, I'm just kidding. I won't do that, but I just had this mental picture of it. I always thought that would be kind of funny. No, I think if we end up in heaven, which I'm sure we are, it's going to be a pretty awesome experience. I don't think we're going to be too concerned about right or wrong. I think we're going to understand very clearly at that point. Okay, so let's start the video again. We'll move on to 10:34, and then we're almost done here. So.
Well, I'm so glad you're with me because I didn't want to be here all by myself. I mean, I just see purpose for our lives that extends beyond the here and now, that there is an eternity that God wants to have with us. His love for us is so deep that it desires to have a continued relationship with us as far as time goes on.
Because I live in Long Beach, I go down to the beach and I see the waves in the ocean. At the beach, they come ashore and they leave. We compare that to life. We take different shapes and different forms, and the length of the wave we have no idea. You show up in different locations which you have no control. The idea that this momentarily shape that we have, this life, and trying to preserve it, and then we're kind of missing the whole point that we are actually that greater ocean.
In my limited capacity as an individual human, like in this form, in this shape, I have no idea. How can I possibly have any idea about what that being ocean is going to mean or be? And so I know that I will continue to be part of the universe, but not as me, not as this.
I would agree with that. I mean, I see no evidence from anything that I can observe or anything that goes on that is more than just wishful thinking that humans in some form are going to exist in some afterlife where they're recognizable and their identities carry on.
When I was a kid, I asked my dad if our pets would be waiting for us in heaven when we died, and my dad said no, and I was shocked, and I was like, why would there not be pets in heaven? And my dad's like, well, there are animals, and I'm like, why not my animals? And he's like, well, they're just like a generic cat and a generic dog. And I went, wait, what? And so at that point, that's when I started to question, like, wait a minute, what happens next? And yeah, I'm kind of, with a lot of you guys here, just saying that, look, wouldn't it be great if we could go on and on and on? But I think because we don't see any evidence for it, I have to be in the camp of, well, we get this one shot, make the most of it, do the best you can. And then when it's done, don't have any regrets, live with doing as much as you could that is good so that you will live on in the memories of those who stay behind.
I'm so sorry your dad told you your dog's not going to heaven. What a crushing thing to hear as a child. All good dogs go to heaven.
That's what the movie said.
It must be true.
I think he was trying to let me down gently. But
I know, yeah.
Like some days, I'm like totally zen. I'm totally there. Like, it's okay. It's all one, and I will just not exist. I'm usually not as afraid of death as I am of dying. Like, I'm afraid of dying because I've seen some really bad dying. I'm very afraid of pain and of you know, the process of dying. But
I lost both my parents from cancer, so I witnessed both process. My mom died over 30 years ago, and it was painful to witness that how my mom kind of health deteriorate. My dad went through the same process, but then he was once writing letters as just really coincides with Buddhist teachings that I'm having a wonderful day, and I'm really grateful for everybody who support us. We have a saying that every day is, as you say, the greatest day. I can see that, you know, intellectually, I can understand it intellectually, but I just wasn't sure if I could feel, if I would be able to say something like that if I'm put in that situation.
It's important to question one's own beliefs.
And this will probably be the last one we have to worry about discussing. Okay, so this one's a big one. So is it important to question your own beliefs?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
I'd say more important to have an open mind.
Okay.
And not in question, not quite, I don't know if question would be the right word I'd use. I'd probably say just keep it.
I'll help you out with that. So question is not necessarily the same thing as doubt your own beliefs. Doubt would
That's what I
imply,
was
yeah, and that's a fair, yeah.
I don't
Question means should you try to understand better why you believe what you believe. Would be the better way to argue that. Like, not necessarily say, well, I shouldn't believe that until I find proof of it, but or think of it as, okay, well, I've been brought up to believe this. Do I really believe it? And if so, why? Why do I believe it? What convinces me, aside from the influence of my parents or the influence of my pastor, that I believe this? So do you think that is a better approach to it?
That's more what I was leaning
Okay.
towards.
Yeah, I feel like that's really important. Like, it's really important to have your own answer as to why. Like you were saying, rather than just like, oh, my parents like taught me this. Like, you have to know why you also believe it.
You know, Peter himself actually defended that. He literally said, it's actually where the term apologetics comes from. I don't know if you've probably heard that term apologetics. But the Greek term is apologia. And in the Koine Greek in the New Testament, Peter said, be ready to give your apologia, your apology. Now, that's not the same thing as what we say apology today. You know, apology today is like saying I'm sorry or something like that. Apology back then literally meant justification, your defense. So Peter basically said, you need to be ready to defend your faith. Because people are going to question it, and you're going to question it. You need to be ready to defend. Like, come up with a reason for why you believe what you believe. I mean, that's pretty cool because when you think of Peter, he failed a few times. I mean, he even doubted, what's the word I'm looking for? Denied Christ when he was pressured to the point. So he went through his own trials, and he got to a point where he realized, this is what I believe, and I know who he is. And that took him his whole life to get to the point. Paul's the same way. Paul openly admitted, I struggled. You know, there were a lot of times where I didn't understand, or I still went back to my old ways, or wanted to go back to my old ways, and he had to fight. So I think when it comes to a belief system, whether you're Christian or not Christian or whatever, you shouldn't just blindly follow something and just assume it's correct. You need to understand, why is this correct? Why does it make sense? I highly recommend, by the way, if you ever, just on this subject, if you're ever questioning your own beliefs, you should look up apologetics. It's a really, really interesting field. And there's all sorts of different perspectives in apologetics that kind of help with you, like understanding how to take scripture and apply it to life, and apply it to beliefs, and apply it to all sorts of things. It's really good. Okay, we'll finish this video, and I think we're going to be about done.
Man, I'm such a skeptic, and that includes questioning my own beliefs, especially if I form a hypothesis and I'm working on an experiment. I mean, you always kind of want it to go a certain way, and you have to do your best to remove that bias, and then a lot of times if you're in research, it just doesn't work.
One of the things I tell students, because I work with students a lot with my nonprofit organization, and I tell them, you know, as they're journeying into becoming scientists, and they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and I just say, look, don't ever work with anyone who's afraid to admit that they don't know something or that they're wrong. Like, those are really important qualities, whether it's in science or any aspect of life. The whole fun in being a scientist is trying to break things, and I actually wanted to start a journal of scientific mistakes so that we could share with each other what went wrong, because too often we only talk about the successes, and I think it's very valuable to also know what failure is and what it teaches us.
The questioning is such a healthy thing. I always think it's a healthy thing. So whenever I see younger monastics or priests, like, yeah, go ahead and question me, or question what you do, and then be okay. And you need to understand intellectually, but at the same time, I want you to understand there are things that's beyond this intellectual understanding. So that's unrecognizable part of understanding that comes only through experience.
Nice meeting you.
We'll stop it there, and I'm going to move on to another thing real quick. You can turn the lights on. Thank you. See if I can. Okay, we'll move on to this in a bit. All right. So yeah, I really like that video a lot, just because everyone seemed to be very cordial. Now, granted, it's a little bit staged. They probably did that for effect, but I've often seen debates on either side, both from Christian perspective and atheist perspective, and scientists that get really heated. I mean, there have been some pretty mean stuff said back and forth. So that was really nice that these people all seem to get along. Who is your favorite person in this, in terms of the argument? Now, I'm not saying who would you pick to believe, but based on the debate or whatever, who were you most convinced by?
I don't know if I heard enough from each individual person, because it was kind of equally spread out among all of them. I don't know if I heard enough from one person individually to pick one.
Okay, fair enough. Anyone disagree, or everyone have someone that they thought better of? Okay, all right, no worries. Okay, I don't know. Personally, the two people I like were the Buddhist monk and the Christian, because they both seemed a bit more. I could be wrong, but they seemed a bit more emotionally attached to what they believed. The lady who was the New Wave Jew, I guess New Wave Jew. I've never actually heard of that per se. That's new to me, but that's interesting. She almost seemed like she didn't really believe in anything. It was kind of like she didn't know what to believe. I could be wrong about that. I'm not accusing her of that, but it just seemed that way. It was kind of like, okay, well, I thought that the geologist was very honest. I appreciated that, because he was openly admitting, look, I mean, I was raised religious, but I really don't know. I'm so confused. Fair point. And I think the other two scientists were pretty well spoken as well. But yeah, the Buddhist monk impressed me the most, I think, believe it or not, just because he seemed to, his explanations, I've always liked, while I don't agree with Buddhism, I've always liked a lot of the way they describe things, because believe it or not, there are very similar aspects between Buddhism and Christianity. They're not the same, and Christianity is certainly more predicated on a relationship with a living God, but Buddhist spiritualism and morality is very similar to Christianity, and it's pretty cool to read some of it. Again, I don't agree with it, but it's definitely a nice read. Okay, so finally, last but not least, the class has the opportunity to go on an earth science related field trip with your, I don't know how to say that. All right, so these are the options of possible planetariums we might visit. I've been to the planetarium in Dahlonega because that's where I went to college, so I've actually visited there. I highly recommend that one, and I checked their website. I can actually go to it and pull it up. That one, I believe, is open. Let's pull it up real quick and check. Oh, we have to go to the actual site. Okay, hold on. UNG. Good, they have a link to it. Okay, so let's see. George E. Coleman Planetarium. Okay, operations update. Effective immediately, we're suspending all of, never mind. Okay, so it's not open. Well, I was wrong. Okay, so we'll see. I'm curious as to what observatories will be open. I'll try to do some research. The other one I was going to recommend is the Tellus Planetarium, because I've also been to that one. Has anyone been to the Tellus Science Museum? It's in Cartersville, Georgia. You have? It's really cool, by the way, if you haven't gone.
We have. We went through
Yes.
here.
Yes, I've been.
Okay, so we might try that one. That one's a bit of a drive, but it's not too bad. It's certainly a day trip. I'm going to see, let's see if there's anything about it being, it currently implies there. Hold up. Okay, beginning of November 2nd, scheduled time will change. Okay, so that's scheduled change. Okay, so they are open. Okay, so that's one to consider. I think I will say this one might be a little different, because I believe you have to buy the full ticket to be able to get into the planetarium, and the planetarium is like a little bit extra. Let me see if it gives a ticket price. It does. Yep, okay, so Bentley planetarium tickets are $3.50 plus tax at the first show with paid museum admission, and let's click the link to paid museum, see how much that is. General, okay, so here we go. So prices for the TELUS would be students or children, which everyone is, if one person here was 18, who was 18? Okay, so you might have to pay adult tax. Well, we might be educating you as a student, but either way, student or child, 3 to 17, it's $11.95 plus tax, and then $3.95 on top of that. With the planetarium is like around $16 if you include tax. So yeah, so you're talking about a $16 trip, and I think we have like $5 we can spare for each student, I believe. So if that's something you'll want to do, let me know. We'll get permission slips out and stuff, and we can try to make a day trip to the planetarium. We have other options. It doesn't have to be this one. If you've got better ideas and you think there's a better one, or you think there's one that's cheaper or whatever, let me know. I'll certainly look into it and consider it. Okay, that's all we got for today. So I'm going to stop recording.